Okay, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Bible Day Live, week 27. I am super excited to be here as usual. So let me just check in and make sure. Okay, so we are looking good. I want to see, let's see if we put the music on 10. That might be too loud. Let's put it on 5. Okay. So we'll go through and figure out if this is a good background music level here. I'm on level 5. Okay. So what we do here, Bible Day Live, on Saturdays at 11 a.m., is we go through the Bible in chronological order. The reason we do it in chronological order is to better understand the stories, the people, to connect the dots and put that in a timeline like fashion so we can tell the stories. One of my goals is to be able to tell Bible stories at will, just off the top of my head. This is what happened. This was the problem. This was the remedy. This was the blessing, whatever. And the chronological Bible was a real game changer for me to be able to do that. So it is my endeavor to go through the Bible every single year, because how many of us know that every time we read the Bible, many times you will come across something that is different, and you know you've read it before, but it's different not because the word changes, it's because we change it. We change. And I look forward to those changes and account those to growing spiritually. Okay, so that is what we are doing. Now, if you have your own Bible translation that you like, here we tend to stick to the King James Version and do some references in the New Living Translation Bible and any other Bible really that helps us make sense of things. Um, you can use one of ours, which you can find at BibleRoom.org, or you can use your own. But the idea here is on Saturdays is to just share what we found interesting in the word this week. So we have what we call a soundtrack. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and get our screen share ready to start this week. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, maybe not so many. I don't talk about it so much. But the thing that I do professionally is I am a project manager. I was a software development project manager for Fortune 500 companies, and that laid the foundation for some of the ways I think about how we use the Bible in our everyday lives. Okay, so one of the concepts in project management is this idea of having a work breakdown structure. And this week, we're going to look at some things in our soundtrack that have to do with remembering the Lord God. And I submit to you that when we are in the throes of life, if we don't already have a framework for including God in the things that we do, it is so easy to just forget or make it a lower priority. It is very intentional to make God and the things of God a intentional part of our lives, and it takes practice like anything else that we do. We want to practice it, put it in practice, plan to put it in practice, plan to use it, plan to do it. All of that stuff is what we do. So the soundtrack this week were some of these topics here. So we had 2 Kings 1 through 14 and the parallel passages in 2 Chronicles, Obadiah, Psalms, and Jonah. So last week we looked at this chart of the kings of Israel that I adapted from a chart I found at 𝑛athanRichardson.com. I added the good king indicators so you can see here the good kings. The good kings are indicated by the golden color on the chart here. And I added the dates for the reigns. And you know what? Let me show the screen. Okay, so this is the one I adapted. Added the dates, added the indicator with the right here, solid color, solid with gold coloring. It means they were a good king. Not a lot of those, by the way. So Asa and Jehoshaphat and Joash were the first three good kings. Okay, so we took that map chart and we adapted it. And this is Nathan's original chart and from NathanRichardson.com. And it was super helpful for sorting out the multiple names for the same person and for the visual of the single unbroken dynasty of the families. That is what Nathan has here in yellow. So as you go from one to the next, the yellow means it was a transfer of power. Yellow, transfer of power, yellow, transfer of power. Because like when you get here and you go here, you wouldn't know which one of these was next if you didn't have the yellow. And the lines, the thick lines, the red or burgundy lines, they represent a transfer of power from family member to family member, parent to child, parent to child. And that is the vertical ones. The horizontal ones are marriages from one person to another right here. And these ones that are connected with this horizontal line, these are siblings. So these down here are siblings. Up here, siblings. Horizontal right here is a spouse. So this chart was super helpful for helping me understand what was happening here and understanding the transfer of power and the dynasties, the different dynasties, because we'll get to Jehu, but the Lord actually told him, your family is going to rule for 4 generations, and that's it. And that's exactly what happened. Jehu reigned, then his son, and then his son, and then his son, and then his son. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there was a transfer of power. Just like the Lord said. Just like the Lord said. Okay, so now to tie it in from last week, we are heading into the kings of Israel. In fact, Solomon was the third king of the monarchy, and he made the kingdom stronger and stronger. After King David died, his son Solomon took charge of the kingdom to make the nation even stronger and richer. He started making big trade deals with countries like Egypt and Phoenicia. He brought in all sorts of extravagant products, gold, silver, horses, women. Okay. His kingdom turned into a buzzing hub where people from all over came to trade and network. As a matter of fact, the theme for last week was kings and queen, attempting to point out that there was a total of 39 rulers, 19 in Israel, the northern kingdom, and 20 in Judah, the southern kingdom. They were all men except one who ruled in Judah for about 6 years. Now, so the deep dive for this week is going to unravel the messy part of this chart, which I have pictured right here. So if we go back and look at the chart, this right here is not straightforward. It's just a little messy. So that's what we're going to unravel this week as we go along here. So the Bible, throughout the Bible, it will say something like Rehoboam became king in the such and such year of another king's reign. And it keeps doing that until you can put together charts like this. It is really, really specific, and you can make these kinds of charts. So, for example, in this chart here, Rehoboam was the son of Solomon, and he began to reign at the age of 41, and he reigned 17 years. So there are like 17 little ticks here. And after that, his son Abijah ruled for 3 years. And after that, his son Asa ruled 41 years. Okay, so we see here Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, right? So this is just the same thing: Rehoboam, Abijah, and Asa. And then the Bible will also say that, for example, here in the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, began Omri to reign over Israel. 12 years, 6 years reigned he in Tirzah. So I just paraphrase that to say in the 31st year of Asa's rule of Judah, Omri began his 12-year rule of Israel. So in Asa's 31st year, Omri began his 12-year rule. So that's how we can put these charts together. Now, one of the things that we have to put in context here is the time period. So this is the time period that the 12 tribes of Israel had been given their land and divided it. And at that time, at the time of the divisions, this is what that looked like. So if you look right here is the Sea of Galilee, right here, okay? And then running along here is the Jordan River, and here is the Dead Sea. Now, those are really, really big landmarks that help us see the landscape of Israel during this time. Well, just as sure as we know that when Israel came along and started taking over territories, there were people that they took the territories from. So Gad here ends up being on the border of Syria, also called Aram, and Jordan. And here, the east tribe of Manasseh was on this border here too. And up here is Lebanon and Naphtali. And Dan is down here at first, but we know that later on he moves up north. So this word Syria and Aram, we hear Syria these days, like in our modern times, we hear Syria. But in Bible times, Aram was the name. Okay. So in the King James Version, you will use, it uses Syrians because Syria was the common English term at the time in that region. So that is right here, Syria. However, in the New Living Translation and some other translations, it uses the term Arameans to be more historically and linguistically accurate to the original Hebrew. So that's why Syria here is also labeled as Aram. Okay? Today, Bible scholars prefer the term Arameans to distinguish the biblical people of Aram from the later nation state known as Syria, especially since the ancient Aramean culture had distinct language and identity. The ancient Arameans spoke Aramaic, for example. So in this map here, if we focus in on this area right here and go to the next page, we have Syria and Aram here. And what we're going to deep dive on is this little tiny area called Ramoth Gilead. Now, if we go back to the bigger picture here, that is Ramoth Gilead right there. And you can see it's in the tip of the territory of Gad. Ramoth Gilead, and this is how it is spelled in the Hebrew letters. It was a hub of tension between the Israelites and the Arameans. I mean, can you see why? It's right on the border. It's right on the border. It is also mentioned as a Levitical city of refuge in the tribe of Gad territory. And there is referred to Ramoth in Gilead. Okay? Because Gilead is the area that Gad conquered. So Ramoth was actually a city or a place within Gilead. In Hebrew, Ramoth means heights or high places. And it so you could really render Ramoth Gilead as heights of Gilead. Heights of Gilead. And you can see a little bit of that here by the way the map shows that this is a lighter color, so that was actually a high place in this map. Like modern day Golan Heights, Ramoth Gilead was a region of strategic and territorial importance. This area here is just on the fringe of the northern fertile flatlands known in the Bible as Bashan. Bashan is in this area, which is a small segment that is now included in the modern and hotly contested Golan Heights. So Golan Heights is this area. It starts like to the right of the Sea of Galilee, and it runs all the way up to Israel's border in the north of Lebanon. So this area right between here. And of course, you can see that when during the land allotments in Moses' day, East Manasseh, the half tribe of Manasseh, was in this area. Now it's been taken over by Syria because all of modern day Israel is to the left of the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River, which runs along here. So if we think about Ramoth Gilead back in Solomon's day, it was the sixth district of Solomon's kingdom, which housed his Israelite official Ben-Geber. And we could see that easily in the Bible. And by the time we get to 853 BC, 60 plus years later, where we are now in Second Kings, it has been it, taken over by the Arameans. So this land here has been taken over by the Arameans. Why Ramoth Gilead was strategically important. It was a fortified city on Israel's eastern border near Aram or Syria. It had changed hands multiple times in previous conflicts. Holding Ramoth Gilead meant securing Israel's eastern frontier from Syrian aggression, and it was a symbolic place because kings had fought and died trying to control it and hold it. Summary of key mentions of Ramoth Gilead. It is where King Ahab was fatally wounded, and they and that happened because they ignored God's warning. Micaiah was a prophet, Ahab was the king of Israel, and Jehoshaphat was the king of Judah. Ahab asked Jehoshaphat, hey, come and help me fight off these Arameans. And Jehoshaphat said, yes, I'll help you. Your men are your men, my men are your men, my horses are your horses. Let's go for it. But let's ask the gods, let's ask God for guidance. So Ahab called in his people and they said, yeah, go ahead. Jehoshaphat said, yeah, but don't you have a prophet of the Lord God to ask? So that was one of the times that Ramoth Gilead was mentioned. Here, Ahab's fatal battle. Of course, this says fatal, so you know that didn't work out for him. Then there was Jehoram wounding battle. Jehoram was another king of Israel in the north, and it was yet another conflict with Syria. How many know or realize that we're still fighting Syria? Israel is still fighting Syria today. Today. So that's so when people talk about peace in the Middle East, I I don't know if that will ever happen that just like that, because this is something that has been going on for ages and ages. Okay, another mention of Ramoth Gilead is Jehu's anointing. Jehu is the commander of the army in Israel, and Elisha sent one of his servants, one of the young prophets, to anoint Jehu because he was camped out as the captain of the army. He was camped out at Ramoth Gilead, probably there, watching, guarding. Maybe Ramoth at that time had changed back hands again. So he was watching it. And him and, his whole troops. And Elisha sent a prophet to anoint Jehu as the next king of Israel. And it was a divine intervention there. So if we go back and look at this chart here, so we've got Ahab, Jehoram, and Jehu. If we look at this chart now, look at this chart. This is where we see those guys: Jehu, Jehoram, Ahab, and Jehoshaphat is mentioned. And you see how some of the names, Jehoram, Joram, these people have some of the same names. So that can make things all the more confusing. Okay. So, like we just saw, Joram, Ramoth Gilead is also the place where in Second Kings it says years later, King Joram of Israel, Ahab's son, and the king of Ahaziah of Judah fought against Hazael of Syria. The king of Syria at that time was Hazael. Joram was wounded and returned to Jezreel to recover. This theological significance is it continues the theme of divine judgment upon Ahab's dynasty. And the divine judgment was one of the things that the young prophet that Elisha sent said to Jehu, that Ahab's dynasty is being judged. So you're to wipe out all of those people and become king because Ahab's dynasty is being punished. And the political significance of this shows the ongoing conflict between Syria and Israel. And this battle that King Joram was injured in, it set the stage for Jehu's rise and violent political change. Okay, so if you look at the chart where you see Jehu takes over, that's one of the lines that's in the yellow, because he wasn't the son of Joram. He was actually a usurper. He just took over, okay, by force. And that you can see on that chart. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Now, our theme this week is really based on the idea of planning, having a plan to remember. Okay, having a plan to remember. So let's look at, with that theme in mind, let's look at these verses in First King. And they continued 3 years without war between Syria and Israel. And he said unto Jehoshaphat, this is the king of Israel speaking, wilt thou go with me to battle to Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as thou art, my people as thy people, my horses as thy horses. And Jehoshaphat said unto the king of Israel, inquire, I pray thee, at the word of the Lord today. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men. And Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of the Lord, besides that we might inquire of him? So these prophets that the king of Israel, which at that time was Ahab, these prophets that Ahab inquired, the 400 of them, they were not prophets of the God of Israel. They were not the Lord God. Jehovah, Yahweh. They were his prophets. And if you look at that chart, you remember how Jeroboam came to be king in the northern kingdom, and he didn't want his people going back down to Judah to worship and do sacrifices in the temple. So he set up these golden calves and things and places of worship up in the north. So all of these people who were called prophets to Baal and other gods were up in the north. And the priests that wanted to worship the Lord God of Israel, they just moved back down south to Judah so they could worship the God of heaven. And so all of these 400 prophets of Baal and other gods, they were like, yeah, go ahead. And Jehoshaphat was like, well, is there not a prophet of the Lord here that we can ask as well? So planning to remember is what I was reminded of when Jehoshaphat said that. It felt like it was just immediate, that him saying, yeah, that's good, but what does the Lord say? And so in our lives, it is good for us to immediately be able to say, what does the Lord say? Or let me pray about that. Let me get confirmation on that before we run off and do stuff that may not be in our best interest. It was like when we make it a habit, it won't be something that we have to pull out, right? Because we're spending time in the Word, we're spending time in fellowship. So when things come up and we need assurance, it is just natural to make sure that we get guidance from God, because that's our normal routine. That's how we normal plan out our days in our life. And here, this is what Jehoshaphat was doing even after 400 prophets said, go ahead. Jehoshaphat had such a good relationship with God that he immediately wanted to make sure that God's input was included as well. And of course, that story that when they did inquire and Prophet Micaiah was there and he was asked, and he was like, no, you should not do that. The Lord says no. And Ahab, threw a little tantrum, and he like he never Ahab said he never tells me anything good, and tried to throw Micaiah in prison until he came back safely. And Micaiah was like, if you come back safely from this battle after I'm telling you that God is telling you not to go, then that means I am not a prophet of the Lord. And of course, we can see that from what we've heard, Ahab did not make it back home. Okay, so this is what that looked like when they were going into that battle. Jehoshaphat and Ahab joined forces against the king of Aram to retake Ramoth Gilead. And the king of Aram was like, Aram is Syria. Look, Jehoshaphat, we're going into this battle, right? And I want you to wear your kingly stuff, and I'm going to be in disguise. Now, I doubt they had t-shirts and baseball hats back then, but this is the picture that AI helped me create to help me kind of see this. Now, why in the world Jehoshaphat would agree to put a target on himself like that, I don't know. I really don't know. But he was dressed up as king, and Ahab was in disguise. And the king of Syria was like, only attack the king of Israel. Just don't even bother with anybody else. So he was really after the king of Israel. And as it happened, some random Damascus archer was just shooting an arrow and hit King Ahab by chance and killed him. How do we not know that when God says it's time for you to go, just random stuff will make sure that you go? In fact, that's how I got over flying the first time that I went on a plane. I reckoned in myself, you know what? If it's my time to go, I can go sitting right here. I don't have to be in the plane. I don't have to be anywhere doing anything that I have chosen. When it's my time, I'm going to go. So why not get on this plane and save myself several hours of distress trying to drive where I'm going? Get on this plane and take God with you. So that's how I got over flying. Okay. So in this situation here, now it does say that Jehoshaphat, okay, the one dressed as king, began to reign in Judah in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel. So, granted, I don't know how old these guys were, but Ahab had been king 4 years longer, 4 years longer than Jehoshaphat. So maybe he was looking to his lead, or giving him respect or whatever, to say that you wear your clothes and I'm not going to wear mine. And that was in 1 Kings 22 and 30. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, as we go into battle, I will disguise myself so no one will recognize me. But you wear your royal robes. So the king of Israel disguised himself and they went into battle. Okay? Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Okay, so here is another example of being intentional about including God in our decision making. Ahaziah's messengers meet Elisha. Then Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab. Now, you know where Moab is. We were up here at 𝑨𝑰𝑫𝑰𝑐, and then below that is Edom, and then below that is Moab. And today, that's like Jordan. And Ahaziah fell through a lattice in his upper chamber that was in Samaria and was sick. And he sent messengers and said unto them, go inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I shall recover from this disease. Now I thought that was a little interesting that he asked whether he would recover, instead of just asking for recovery. Okay. But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say unto them, is it not because there is not a God in Israel that ye go to inquire at Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Now therefore thus saith the Lord, thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art gone up, but shall surely die. And Elisha departed. this said to me that God is our God when we are his people. So we can't be forgetting him and asking everybody else but God what we should do. Asking everybody else but God for advice. Okay. And here's another incident along those same lines. Jehoram meets Moab rebellion. 2 Kings chapter 3. Now, Jehoram, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel in Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and reigned 12 years. So now King Jehoshaphat, he has more experience. He's been at it for 18 years now. And here comes the son of Jehoram, brand new to the game of being king, right? And he went and sent to Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am as thou art, my people as thy people, and my horses as thy horses. But Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of the Lord, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? So here again, this is that habit of making sure you have the Lord's approval for the thing, even for the decision that you've already made. You know, he already told them that he would go. And then he says, but we need to inquire of the Lord as well. And one of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, here is Elisha, the son of Shaphat, which poured water on the hands of Elijah. Elisha, remember, was the successor of the prophet Elijah, the great prophet Elijah. Now, if we look over here, this is Jehoshaphat right here. And this is Jehoram, the son of Ahab. Now, this, going back to Nathan Richardson's chart, in this particular verse, Joram is called Jehoram. So he's called by both names. Okay, that's why this chart, having this chart as a cheat sheet, is so very helpful. Because as you're going along, you can refer to it and kind of see, oh, okay, this is the same guy. You can see that. And you can also see here on this chart that Jehoshaphat was one of the good kings. He was the son of King Asa, which was a good king. So it just looks like Jehoshaphat was a nice guy. I mean, he went to battle with Ahab, fighting in Ramoth Gilead, and here's his son coming again. Hey, will you help me go to battle with Moab? So apparently, Jehoshaphat is just a really good and nice king, being in alliance with the north. So you remember, this side of the chart is northern Israel, the kings in the north. And this side of the chart is the kings in Judah, or the southern kingdom. And we remember that the southern kingdom is the dynasty that is one unbroken dynasty from which King David started, and it goes all the way to Messiah, King Jesus the Messiah. An unbroken dynasty, a promise kept. So that is where Jehoshaphat is. And he is actually going up to the north to help his relatives, really, because remember, we started out with the 12 tribes of Israel. So, really, they're family members. Even though they fought like cats and dogs a lot of times, and there was war between them many times and over, they were family. They were family. Okay, so here is another example of the Lord, the word of the Lord, and incorporating it and planning to incorporate the word into our lives. So this was a Syrian captain. Remember, Syria and Israel. Syria, also called Aram. This was a Syrian captain that was healed. They actually there was the king of Syria had an Israelite girl in the house, and she was the one that recommended that Naaman go and see the prophet about his leprosy. So in 2 Kings, we see now Naaman, king, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. And then we skip down to verse 13. And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do something great, would thou not have done it? How much rather then, when he said to thee, Wash and be clean? Then Naaman went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, the way Elisha told him to, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Now, what that reminded me of is, when God does respond and tells us what to do, that we not judge what God is saying by our own standards. He's the God of heaven. Who am I to say, like Naaman did, well, gosh, I thought maybe you'd tell me to do something more significant than going to wash my face in the Jordan River. Can't you give me something hard to do? It was just very, very telling. And I could see myself doing that. I could see us doing that. Like, what? Lord, I'm praying to you and you're telling me to do something as simple as believe? No, you got to give me something harder than that. I mean, how ridiculous does it sound? But that is kind of what Naaman was saying here. So if we plan to remember that God is sovereign, if he says do something, we need to get out of our own way and just do that. Okay. So this slide here is just pointing to the same idea. But I did want to say here, in 2 Kings 9, while the Israel army was camped at Ramoth Gilead, the prophet Elijah sent a young prophet to anoint Jehu as king over Israel. And this tells us that divine authority to raise up and tear down rulers, that is exactly what God has. And here is another example here So if we look at Omri, Omri's son Ahab, Jezebel was married to Omri. Jezebel and Ahab had two sons, Ahaziah and Joram. Joram was also called Jehoram. Jezebel and Ahab also had a daughter named Athaliah. Athaliah was married to King Jehoram. Jehoram was one of the kings in the southern kingdom of Judah. This side here, remember, represents the northern kingdom of Judah. So Athaliah married Jehoram, no doubt with this great friendship between Jehoshaphat and Ahab, them going to battle with each other and having this great relationship. And then Joram also asking Jehoshaphat to go to battle, and he said yes. And they asked the Lord and all of that stuff. So these two kingdoms, the northern and the southern, maybe they're seeing, at this point of history, that it's good for us to be together to fight against our enemies. So here comes a political alliance marriage. Ahab gives his daughter Athaliah to marry Jehoshaphat's son. And you can see by these names here that Athaliah, and Jehoram have a son. And they name their son the same name as Athaliah's brother Ahaziah. So can you imagine? This is my uncle. I have the same name as my uncle. Hello, my name is Ahaziah. And my uncle's name is Ahaziah. So, maybe they had nicknames for him at the picnics and stuff. But Ahaziah also had another name, Jehoahaz. Jehoahaz. So sometimes you'll see him in the Bible as Ahaziah, and sometimes you'll see him as Jehoahaz. Just like Jehoram and Joram here, just like Joram and Jehoram here. Okay? And you really have to watch the context of the story to know who is who. All right? So Joash is the son of Ahaziah here. He's one of the good kings, good kings, good kings. Now, this story here unwinds because this line right here, it goes over to Jehu. Remember, Jehu was the captain of the army of Israel. And he was the one that Elijah sent the young prophet to anoint as the next king of Israel because Ahab's dynasty had been judged. They were still worshiping other gods. They still had all of those poles and stuff set up, and his dynasty was being judged. Jezebel was the worst, killing the Lord's prophets and just doing the most. And Ahab's dynasty was judged by Joram, where this yellow line right here is going. So when that happens, this guy, Ahaziah, which is, Athaliah's son, he just happens to be visiting Joram when Jehu came to wipe him out. And if you remember, Joram was injured at that battle in Ramoth Gilead. Jehu came to wipe him out, and he killed him, and Ahaziah was there, and he killed him too, because now they're really all in the family. And Jehu was charged with getting rid of all of them. And so when Athaliah heard that, she started wiping out all of the royal family, all of the royal family that was in this dynasty of King David. She thought she had killed every last one of them. But there was a woman named Jehosheba. She was the daughter of King Jehoram. Now, we don't know if she was a daughter that was with Athaliah, the wife here, this union, or he had another wife. But she was the daughter of King Jehoram. And so that made her the sister or half sister of Ahaziah. And that meant, you go back, and that meant that this Athaliah was someone that she was very familiar with how nasty she had been, very familiar with that, her mom had killed all the prophets and all of that. So to keep the dynasty intact, Auntie Jehosheba, she took one of the royal men, little boys, took the baby, took him to her husband, who was the priest, Jehoiada, and hid him for 6 years at the temple. And that is how the line kept going. And when Joash was old enough, the prophet, the priest, Jehoiada, presented the little boy to the people of Israel, and he ended up being one of the good kings of Israel. So that unravels this part of that chart. Okay? So if we go back and look at it, we can see how that explanation right there is this part of this chart that looks really confusing when we look at it. So when Jehu was anointed king of Israel, he went, got rid of King Joram. King Ahaziah in the south was visiting him because Joram was injured in the battle at Ramoth Gilead. And while Jehu was there, he killed Joram, he killed Ahaziah, he even killed the 70 sons of Joram because he wiped out the whole dynasty. And Athaliah heard that her son had been killed, and then she starts wiping out all of this dynasty. And after 6 years, she ruled, the only woman who ruled in Jerusalem, in Judah, the only woman who ruled. She did that for about 6 years. And then Jehoiada the priest presented the little boy Joash. He becomes king, and he was 7 years old when he became king of Judah. And that actually brings us down to this part of the messianic genealogy, and we're under King David here, and this is where we are right here with Joash. And then in the soundtrack for this week, it actually mentioned the reigns of Amaziah and Uzziah. And that is where week 27 leaves off. So hopefully that has helped unravel that part of the genealogy and the kings of Israel. So next week we continue, and I pray and hope that this has been helpful to you. It was really good for me to kind of go through all of that really in depth and really get the story straight, because a chronological Bible can really help you do that. So I pray the Lord blessing on your life, and I pray you good and blessed sessions fellowshipping with the Lord in his word, and I look forward to seeing you next week.